Dominic Cummings' damning testimony describes a chaotic government ill-prepared to face a global pandemic. He told the committee the Prime Minister played down the threat, describing reports as scare stories. We already know the Prime Minister headed off on a working holiday mid-February, and Mr Cummings said today some other senior ministers were off skiing during this critical stage of the pandemic. We know too that Boris Johnson missed the first 5 COBRA meetings on COVID-19. On the 3rd of March, the Prime Minister was still boasting about shaking hands.
I'm shaking hands continuously. I was at a hospital the other night where I think there were actually a few coronavirus patients, and I shook hands with everybody, you'll be pleased to know.
One of the most controversial pandemic debates has been around herd immunity and if it was indeed government policy. What has become clearer today is that it was certainly a government assumption and desired, despite recent denials from Number 10. On the 12th of March, the UK entered the delay phase, which the government hoped would slow the spread of COVID and push the peak of infections away from the winter. On the same day, the Prime Minister made a grim warning. Many more families, he said, are going to lose loved ones. On the 13th of March, Sir Patrick Vallance appeared on Sky News. Here's what he said about herd immunity.
I mean, what sort of percentage of people need to have contracted the virus?
Probably about 60% or so. And we think that this virus is likely to be one that comes back year on year, become like a seasonal virus, and communities will become immune to it.
3 days later, the delay policy was dropped and the country moved towards the first national lockdown on the 23rd of March. One of the biggest scandals in the pandemic has been the failure to protect the elderly in care homes. Here's what Matt Hancock told a press conference in May.
We tried to build infection control and the support and the protective ring around care homes right from the start.
Dominic Cummings said today the government rhetoric of throwing a shield around care homes was complete nonsense. And this evidence corroborates a Sky News report broadcast on the 6th of April that elderly patients were being discharged into care homes without being tested and allowing the disease to spread with devastating consequences. Today, Dominic Cummings also touched on the second lockdown. He claimed today if he had resigned in September and put pressure on the Prime Minister to lock down sooner, then tens of thousands of people would still be alive. By the 6th of October, SAGE documents show in England the number of infections and hospital admissions is exceeding reasonable worst-case scenario planning. On October 31st, Boris Johnson is forced to announce the second national lockdown. Mr Cummings said this is when he heard the Prime Minister say he would rather see bodies pile high than impose another lockdown. This is the testimony of one man, but it does ask searching question of the government's response to this crisis. The truth may only emerge once there is a full public inquiry into the pandemic.